In this part of the chapter, we'll be learning about classification and evolution. We'll be further deepening our understanding of idea of classification, that why is a classification necessary and how it is happening. It is happening on the basis of evolution. That means simple organisms are evolving into complex organisms and how it is happening, and then further how we are able to classify on the basis of this evolution. Let's find out in this chapter part wise part. Evolutionary relationship or phylogenetic relationship. Phylogenetic relationship is the relationship on the basis of evolution. Charles Darwin was the first person to hint at this in his book Origin of Species, and he told that in 1859 he gave theories that all organisms they evolved from unicellular organisms. Means Darwin basically laid that foundation that there are simple organisms and the existence of complex organisms that has actually come about on the basis of on the process during the process of how these simple organisms they transformed into complex organisms, and he called this process of transformation as evolution. Okay, Darwin was the first person to point this out, and the closer revolutionary relation between two organisms is also one of the basis of the classification. Means two organisms who have evolved, who have transformed, who have been made complex from some simple cells, simple mode of existence. Okay, so the closer the relationship between the evolutionary relationship between two species they are, the closer their chances are of them being classified together. Okay, so two plant varieties, if they are evolving say from some very similar plant existence, okay, so they would have this simple mode of classification, this similar mode of classification. Okay, and if say two animals, they are also evolving from a certain simple organism, and they have different they have less differences and more similarities on the account of being evolved from a similar organism. Okay, so they can be also clubbed together, they can also be classified together. So Darwin gave this theory in the first place. Biodiversity. The term biodiversity determines the variety, the diverse variety of plants and animals in a given geographical area. So in a particular area, the total number of plants and animals that exist there, that cohabitate, okay, that the existence, okay, that term is known as biodiversity, the peaceful existence, the such existence that the ecological balance is maintained. Okay, and that diverse life forms they share the environment and are affected by each other as well. So this sharing and the affects that they get from each other. Okay, so there must be some problems that say some animals must be facing by plants and vice versa. Okay, but there is some other outlet by which a harmony is created, a balance is there, and an ecological balance is has been maintained, has been strived. Okay, so this term biodiversity is given in a particular geographical area, the variety of plants and animals that are there, that has been defined, that has been stated by this term biodiversity. Which organisms are called primitive and how are they different from the so-called advanced organisms? So primitive organisms, I had already told you, but I am here re-emphasizing it, that primitive organisms are those simple organisms be it on the nature of cells, that means they may be unicellular, okay, and they may have other characteristic, other features that are not complicated, they are simple. Okay, and they are different from the so-called advanced organisms because these advanced organisms, they are complex in nature. All right, the complexity increases when the number of cells increases. Okay, and prokaryotes, they can also be put under the category prokaryotes. They can also be put under the category of primitive or simple organisms because they do not have a well-defined nucleus, they do not have membrane-bound organelles, so their simplicity is still there. But when you come to eukaryotes, Okay, when you come to eukaryotes, the advancedness, okay, the complexity, it increases because more membrane bound organelles are added, and the nucleus, it is also getting more defined, so it has more other functions, other features. Okay, so this is how primitive organisms are different from the so-called organisms. Will advanced organisms be as simple as complex? So yes, we have already established this in the previous question. Advanced organisms, they would be the same as simple organisms, because in advanced organism the complexity is increasing. Okay, the complexity is increasing. And how the complexity is increasing? Again, by the same category criteria that we have already established on the nature of cell, that whether the cell, when the cell is eukaryote, the complexity increases because membrane bound organelle increases, and when the cell is multicellular, then again the complexity increases, and this can be seen in the advanced organisms as compared to the primitive or the simple ones. Now we have the hierarchy of classification. We have this broader classification on the basis of which we identify that certain organisms, they fall under this category, and these certain organisms, they fall under the other category. Okay, and this hierarchy of classification, this broad classification, had been given to us by three biologists, Ernest Haeckel, Robert Whittaker, and Carl Woese. Okay, 1894, 1959, and 1977. They all tried to classify living organisms, and they broadly categorized them on the basis of kingdom. Okay, so kingdom is that highest hierarchy where we are having broader under which umbrella we are having other groups and subgroups related to that particular creature. So we have 5 kingdoms over here. We have plant kingdom, we have the animal kingdom, we have this fungi kingdom, we have this protist or the protista, and then we have the monera. Monera is the most simple one, or you can say it is the most primitive one. Okay, and we have over here plants and animals, and these are the more advanced, the more complex organisms. So starting from Monera, let's learn that they are prokaryotes. Okay, and they are able to absorb and photosynthesize. So they are either autotrophic or they are heterotrophic. All right, and they produce either sexually or asexually. Then we have protista. They are the eukaryotes. They are unicellular. Monera is unicellular, remember that. Okay, protista, they are either unicellular or multicellular. Like Monera, they also either produce their own food, they either photosynthesize, or they depend on others, so either autotrophs or heterotrophs. The reproduction is sexual and asexual. When we come to fungi, the complexity is increasing. So Monera is the only kingdom that is prokaryotic in nature. All right, the other 4 kingdoms, they are all eukaryotes. Okay, all of them, they are eukaryotes. Okay, so fungi, it is multicellular. We had that unicellular level to the protista. When we come to fungi, we have more complex levels. So we have the multicellular level. They are purely heterotrophic. They are non-motile, means they cannot move from one place to another, and they reproduce sexually. By asexual reproduction, I mean that no gametes are involved. We had learnt about gametes, if you remember, in the cell chapter during the cell division. All right, so no gametes are there during asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction always involves gametes. Those single life-giving cell which combines with other gamete to form one single cell of that organism, which ultimately grows into the very advanced one. All right. Animals, they are eukaryotic, they are multicellular, they are also heterotrophic, they are motile, means animals can move from one place to another, and they reproduce sexually. Plants, eukaryotes, multicellular, plants are autotrophic, fully autotrophic, they are able to photosynthesize, they are non-motile, means they cannot move from one place to another, and they reproduce sexually. So this is that broad classification of the 5 kingdoms that we have over here, and under this umbrella term of plants or animals, we have other divisions and subdivisions on the basis of which we assess all animals under the animal kingdom, all plants under the plant kingdom, all fungi under fungi, and protista, they are different they are also microscopic. Yes, they are also microscopic but different, and Monera also, they are different and they are also microscopic. So Whittaker's 5-kingdom classification is Monera, Protista, fungi, plantae and animalia. These groups, they are formed on the basis of their cell structure. Okay, cell structure means whether they are eukaryotes or whether they are prokaryotes. The body organization means whether they are, multicellular or unicellular. Okay, and there is this mode and source of nutrition, means whether they are autotrophic or heterotrophic. So 3 broader categories. Okay, this is to be remembered. The cell structure means whether they are prokaryotes, eukaryotes, whether cell wall is present or not present. Okay, mode and source of nutrition, whether they are autotrophs or whether they are heterotrophs. And lastly, the body organization means whether the body organization ends at the tissue level, or it is further advanced up to the organ or organ system level, or whether it just stops at the cellular level. Then we have the modification introduced by Voges via dividing the Monera into Archaebacteria or the Eubacteria. So Voges, he further divided the Monera kingdom into 2 categories, okay, the Archaebacteria and the Eubacteria. You don't have to study in detail about all these. This is just for your information, and this is also in use. So we have this previous 5-kingdom classification via Whittaker, which is also in use, and we have this other classification by Voges where he divides the Monera kingdom into Archaebacteria and Eubacteria. That is also in use, and this is the increasing ladder, you can say the hierarchy. Okay, the hierarchy of division. So this we have this kingdom at the topmost level. All right, we have these 5 kingdoms that we have learned: Monera, Protista, fungi, plantae and animalia. They are divided into groups and subgroups. So first, the smallest, or you can say the simplest basis of classification is the species. So category similarities in the species, they would be more as compared to the similarities that we have in the kingdom. So as we go up, the similarities decrease, and as we go down, the similarities increase. Means we are clubbing 2 or more similar creatures together into one species. Then say 2 or 3 more species which have similar categories, they are being clubbed together into one genus. Okay, then 2 or more genus that have similar categories, they are clubbed into one family. So naturally, when you are increasing the order, when you are going up the ladder, the number of similarities, they decrease, and when you are going down, the number of similarities, they will increase. Okay, because species is the most simplest way of classification, and kingdom is the most broader term, the umbrella under which we have further subdivisions. So naturally, the umbrella is going to have less similarities. After family, we have order, then we have class, and finally we have the phylum for animals. In plants, there is another name for phylum, that is the division. And at the topmost level, we have the kingdom, those 5 kingdom that we just saw: Monera, Protista, fungi, plantae and animalia. The hierarchy of classification, that's by separating organisms on the basis of hierarchy of characteristics into smaller and smaller groups, we arrive at the basic unit of classification, that is species. Since we are dividing into smaller and smaller groups, at the species level, the similarities between organisms, that is at its max. Similarities is at its maximum level. Okay. And broadly, a species includes all organisms that are similar enough to breed and perpetuate. So we are clubbing 2 or more species into genus, similar 2 or more genus into family, and so on and so forth. So this is the first part where you learned about that how classification is occurring, what are the broader terms into creatures, animals or plants or other microscopic organisms, what are the 5 kingdoms that they are divided into, and what is evolution, how is evolution helping us to assess that how can we classify them into a more efficient manner. This is the second part of classification and evolution. Here we will be learning more about the 5 kingdoms that we have seen in the first part, and we will be learning that on the basis of evolution, that means prokaryotes to eukaryotes, or you can just classify it as from simple to complex, okay, the evolution of simple organisms to complex organisms, how it is helping us to classify organisms, and how we are dividing these organisms under 5 kingdoms, and again what are the various divisions and subdivisions. First, we are having the Monera kingdom, okay. These organisms, if you remember that bigger flowchart that we had seen in the previous part, these organisms, they do not have a defined nucleus, means they are prokaryotes. They do not have defined nucleus, their organelles are not membrane bound, and they are unicellular. Okay, and cell walls are present in some groups of this, some organisms of this group, and they are either autotrophic or heterotrophic, means although they are unicellular, they can sustain by either producing food for themselves, or they can depend on other organisms for food. Bacteria, and blue-green bacteria is the example, and this structure over here, this is an example of a unicellular prokaryote organism. Next, we are having the Protista kingdom. This is the second kingdom. Remember, we are now going deep into each kingdom, and we are learning the characteristics in a little more detail. So, Protista, if you remember, they are unicellular or multicellular eukaryote organisms. Only the Monera kingdom, only the organisms under the Monera kingdom, they are prokaryotes. Further on, all organisms, they are eukaryotes. Locomotion, they have hair-like cilia, very fine structures, hair-like cilia, or they have whip-like flagella. Flagella is here. This is the flagella that can be more, you can say, more thicker in consistency than this hair-like cilia. Okay, that is more thicker and that is more longer. Okay, and flagella, it is often lesser in number, and cilia, since they are thin and they are fine, so they are tiny in number. Okay, and nutrition, they are either autotrophic or heterotrophic, just like the Monera kingdom. Examples, algae or protozoans like Plasmodium and Antamoeba. Next, you have the fungi kingdom. This is the third kingdom, and here you have heterotrophic, means no autotrophs over here. These organisms, they clearly and evidently they depend on other organisms for their food, and they are eukaryotes in nature. Nutrition, we are having three, means this heterotrophic nutrition is being divided into 3 categories. First of all, we are having the saprophytic nutrition. Okay. Secondly, we are having the parasitic nutrition. Okay. And thirdly, we are having a symbiotic relationship that helps the fungi in order to obtain food. And these three fall under the category of this heterotrophic nutrition. So what are they? They are either saprophytic, means they use the decaying, the dead organic materials or the decomposing organic materials as food, or they are parasitic in nature. The second category means they live as a host they live as a parasite, on other organisms. Those organisms can be called host. So they live on host, and whatever food that host organism is using for its own sustenance, these parasites, fungi, they suck or they derive the nutrition from the host organism. So they are parasites. Okay, and many of them, they have the capacity to become multicellular organisms, as we know. All right, that fungi, they are multicellular and they have cell walls. Okay, they are not plants, but they have cell walls made of a tough complex sugar, which is known as chitin. Examples are yeast, molds, and mushrooms. And regarding the third mode of nutrition, the third mode of heterotrophic nutrition, that you can see here in the lichens, they have a symbiotic relationship. So they combine, they basically live together with cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria is your blue-green algae. It is also known as your blue-green algae. So they live together with this blue-green algae, and the algal part, the cyanobacteria part, that provides food. That being autotroph, it provides food. And the fungi, that is a lichen, that uses that uses the food that the cyanobacteria produces for its sustenance, and in return it is providing the cyanobacteria minerals and substratum for its sustenance or for its production of food. So symbiotic relationship means that kind of relationship that works both ways. Okay, that kind of relationship that works both ways means the blue green algae that is providing food, okay, to the lichen, and the lichen is providing minerals and substratum to the blue green algae. So both of them are providing something or the other for their sustenance. Next, we have the plant kingdom. These are multicellular eukaryotes with cell wall, and their nutrition, their autotrophs means they wholly synthesize food for themselves and also for others. So they use chlorophyll for photosynthesis. And animalia, like they're also multicellular, they're eukaryotes, but they are without cell wall. They only have cell membrane. And nutrition, they are heterotrophs, means like autotrophs, like plants, they are purely autotrophs. Animals, animalia kingdom, they are purely heterotrophs. Okay, so here we had our fourth kingdom, that is the plantae. Okay, and finally we are having our last kingdom over here, that is our animal kingdom, commonly known as the animalia. Okay, let's dive on to some questions now. What is the criterion for classification of organisms as belonging to kingdom Monera or Protista? So we know the three common type of classification, that is the nature of cell, then the body organization, okay, and lastly we have the mode of nutrition. This is the three major category on which we are dividing, on which we are classifying. Yes, there are other categories as well, but these are the major ones. Okay, so criterion for classification of dividing animals under organisms under Monera or Protista. So we know that in Monera, the nature of the cell, they are prokaryotes. I am abbreviating over here. Okay, and in Protista we have the eukaryotes. All right, only Monera organisms under the Monera kingdom are prokaryotes. The rest of them are eukaryotes. Body organization, both of them we know that they work at the cell level. All right, so there is no formation of tissue. Okay, so the body organization in both of these kingdom, they are at the cellular level. But Protista, Monera is very strictly unicellular in nature, prokaryotes plus unicellular in nature, but Protista, it is also multicellular in nature. So there are some, or there may be some organisms in the Protista kingdom that the body organization here that could be multicellular, not for all of them but for some of them. Okay, mode of nutrition in Monera and in Protista, both of them we know that they are autotrophs or heterotrophs. Okay, so we have the nature of cell, where Monera is a prokaryote, Protista is the eukaryote. Body organization, this works at a unicellular level. This is the unicellular or multicellular. So broadly speaking, the body organization under both Monera and Protista is under the cellular level. But since some organisms under the Protista, they are also multicellular. So for those organisms, the body organization could be at the multicellular level, at the multicelled level. Mode of nutrition in both of them, it is either autotrophic or heterotrophic. In which kingdom will you place an organism which is single-celled, eukaryotic and photosynthetic? So we have just seen that Protista is that kingdom where we have eukaryotes. Since prokaryotes, they are only in the Monera kingdom. And fungi, we know that there the cellular level is, the body organization level is at the multicellular level. So Protista can be the only kingdom where the organism is single-celled, and also photosynthetic means also autotrophic. That means the mode of nutrition over here is autotrophic. Okay. And the last question, in the hierarchy of classification, which grouping will have the smallest number of organisms with maximum common characteristics and which will have the largest number of organisms? So we know that the smallest number of organisms but having the maximum common characteristics. If you remember that as you go up the ladder of hierarchy, the similarities will decrease and the organisms will increase. But as you go downwards, the similarities will increase but the organisms will decrease. So species is that smallest number, that smallest classification where you have the smallest number of organisms and you have the maximum common characteristics, because this is at the lowermost step of the hierarchy, and kingdom is at the highermost step. Okay, so kingdom is that classification where you have the largest number of organisms but with decreasing number of similarities. This we have learned over here in the classification and evolution part. We have learned about the 5 kingdoms, and we have learned about how classification is being made under these 5 kingdoms as well, on the nature of cell, on the basis of body organization, and on the basis of mode of nutrition. Further on, we will be learning in detail about 2 kingdoms, Plantae kingdom and Animalia kingdom. So let's find out in the next part of the chapter.